Welcome back to another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm your host, Stephen Roy Goodman. I'm here at Sofia University in Bulgaria, where we're going to be speaking about disinformation. And I have two guests with me today. Ralitsa Kovacheva, who is a faculty member here at the university and also runs Fact Check Bulgaria, and Svetlozar Kirilov, who's also a professor here at the university. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome here in Bulgaria.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Ralitsa, maybe if we could start with you, maybe with a very simple question. What is disinformation? That was a joke. I realize it's a big question. What is disinformation?
Disinformation is false or incorrect information which is intentionally created and disseminated in order to harm the society or to have some financial or political benefit from it. So disinformation means that something is designed to manipulate the society and to create divisions in the society and to make a society to be unable to take common political or important decisions for this society.
And Svet, how is that different from misinformation?
Misinformation is also false and inaccurate information, but it is disseminated without the malicious intent. So people who spread misinformation, they believe that it's true and spread these kind of messages because they consider they are funny or interesting from the audience, but disinformation is untrue, it's false. So both disinformation and misinformation can be considered as fake news. The difference is the intent. In the case of disinformation, those who spread these false messages, they know that these are false messages and they spread them intentionally. Usually they have some kind of hidden agenda. Economic or political, and they most likely are going to benefit if people believe in this in disinformation. So this is the major difference: the intent of spreading information.
And the issue of the intent is interesting because, maybe I can throw this to both of you. So a lot of students will share all sorts of things with their phones. But they may not necessarily intend to be spreading anything that's false or malicious in any way. They're just spreading something that one of their friends said was particularly interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's why social media platforms, for example, they focus on dissemination. In their understanding, disinformation is not related to the content itself. They call the inaccurate, in any way, content, they call it misinformation, and they give the task to check this information to third-party fact-checkers, but the platforms themselves deal with dissemination, with coordinated sharing, with inauthentic behavior. These are the signs for this malicious intent. These are the signs there is an organized network of profiles, of bots, of channels to spread this disinformation.
But what about governments who do that, or political parties, or somebody who's running for office and then trying to get somebody to basically do some of their work for them?
So people in an open democratic society need to be critical thinkers, to be a little bit skeptic and to be media savvy. Usually use the concept of media and information literacy. And nowadays we live in something that could be called a revolt of the internet masses. So in the past, usually certain elite circles have the right to produce and spread information: politicians, scholars, scientists, journalists. But now, in the advent with social networks, social platforms, everyone with access to computer and internet can share information. On the one side, it could be positive, some kind of democratization of information. More people can distribute messages, but on the negative side, it is the declining of the quality of the content, especially in user-generated content and the so-called peer-to-peer communication. Very often messages are of low quality, and this is and in an open democratic society, people need to have accurate information in order to have decisions which are rational, to influence their opinions related to different matters, politics, environment, and so on. So, in order to help people to be more critical, maybe the first rule is to think about the source information, the source of the information. Is it reliable? Is it reliable? And the second rule could be, are there emotional appeals in the information? If there are emotional appeals, that is very likely that this information could be fake news. When you see on the social networks captions like "you need to read this," you have to copy this, or something that politicians or doctors or scientists don't know you to know, it's suspicious.
Well, speaking of the doctors and the scientists, I think that's interesting. Maybe we could chat about that a little bit, because in the interest of things that aren't true, I suppose, we just came out of the period of the vaccines. How do you know when a scientist is speaking and saying something? How do you know that that is so? What's the credibility of the scientist, and how are people hearing the message of that scientist?
The first thing is how media understand what the scientist says and how media check whether this scientist is reliable or not. Because during the pandemic, here is where mainstream media failed. They published every day different studies, some peer-reviewed, some not, some published, some not, some reliable, some not. It was, of course, very difficult during the pandemic, especially the first year when the information changed every day. One study today says one thing, tomorrow another study says another thing. It was very difficult for the science itself. But when media didn't understood these scientific discoveries correctly, and when they decided to publish every day one scientific article and not to wait until this article be peer-reviewed or verified in one way or another, it created this feeling in the general public that nothing is true. It's the so-called infodemic, where there is too much information and it is not possible to know which is true and which is not true.
But what should the media have done in Bulgaria, elsewhere in the EU or in the United States? Should they have not published information about the pandemic?
No, of course they should publish information about the pandemic. But in my opinion, the right tone was to be kind of restrained and saying all the time that these are the data today, that these data are, for example, based on 30 patients. It is not possible to make judgments for the whole population based on a study on 30 patients. Or, for example, remind that these data are always accumulated, and maybe in 3 months or 6 months we will have the bigger picture, kind of explaining how the science works. Because people need, I understand that people need someone to say this is right, this is wrong, this is the virus and this is the treatment. But this is not how things look like in real life and in the scientific field, no matter which science.
Well, I don't know about Bulgaria, but in the United States, we lost about 1% of our population through the pandemic. And many of the people who died were people who didn't take the vaccine. So, and of course some before the vaccine was even invented. But I'm intrigued by this issue of you want to trust the scientists, but I'm also intrigued by the notion of what happens if there's research about something that has never been researched before? And how do you give a platform for something that might potentially help someone down the road, but on the other hand, not hurting people or killing people?
I think this is a decision that should be made by scientists, not by the media. The scientific society is the first point where the scientific production should be assessed, and scientific society is the first place where some scientists that are not that do not meet the standards should be pointed at, and the scientific society should say this is not reliable, this is not true, your methodology is not correct, or things like that. But we see the same thing here in Bulgaria. We keep silence when our colleagues do things that we do not believe that the science should be done by this way. But somehow we expect media to be aware of that and to say, okay, you're a professor and you're a professor, but I think you're more professor than him or her. It is not possible to be done by the journalists and by the media.
But Svet, you've been teaching here for a while, and so when you teach journalism, how do you make sure that the future teachers are doing exactly what Ralitsa is just suggesting?
It's a complicated task, but nevertheless it's possible to be done. And in this case of disinformation, we have the problem with trust in society, and it's possible to think about crisis in trust related to three major actors: the politicians, the media, and scientists. And to some extent, distrust in society partly is influenced that our type of democracy is a representative democracy. People vote for politicians and they delegate to them the right to rule, but still most citizens cannot participate directly in taking decisions. And when there is a lack of transparency in politics, it creates an environment for distrust, because people don't know how politicians or how take decisions, or how journalists choose which news to publish and which pieces of information not to publish, and also scientists what is the quality of their research and the air and the level of their competencies. So because of that, let's say there are, if we analyze this information, it's possible to delineate major fears in society. So.
Well, that's interesting, and I was interested in your issue of the trust and the fears. How do you get rid of those fears? With more information? With better information?
For instance, one difference between Europe and the United States is that in Europe, public service media are quite well established. They usually have large audiences, and they have more obligations prescribed by law to provide citizens with accurate and information which is verified, which is reliable. And in this case, public service media are not Ministry of Truth. They also make mistakes sometimes, but they are uncountable. They have this obligation to correct mistakes. So it's possible. So and in case of social media, social platforms, there are not such obligations for spreading accurate information, for checking the sources.
Well, if we can expand this a little bit to, let's say, pop stars. So Taylor Swift is a pretty big performer around the world. She has a platform, if she wanted to, I suppose, could say things that are true or not true about all sorts of political issues. And how would anybody be able to correct that?
I really don't know. I haven't think about Taylor Swift, really. But as for influencers, it is valid the same principle as for all politicians on social media. There is a policy they not to be fact-checked, because the idea that these people have the right to say what they need, that it is freedom of expression. So if a fact checker or, I don't know, a citizen volunteers to fact check and say this is not true, or politicians or whatever is the person who wants to fact check, it is he or she is free to do this. But social media platforms would not do anything about Taylor Swift saying something. It is the same situation here in Bulgaria. We have a huge amount of disinformation spread by politicians, but still they're untouchable on social media.
But your site, factcheck.bg, is supposed to do this exact thing. You're checking to see whether the facts that a politician says or cites is true or not.
Yes, we do that.
But are you doing that all the time? Do you find yourself working 24 hours a day because politicians are constantly saying untrue things, or they're sometimes saying untrue things?
Not all politicians. I think you in the United States, you know well that there are some politicians that who use lies intentionally, who disinform intentionally, because it is, of course, it is more attractive to the audience. It makes you special. It makes you different. So, of course, we have same cases here. We have politicians intentionally using disinformation all the time, including disinformation that we have already debunked, but still they keep using it again and again. And of course, we have political actors that sometimes say something which is not true, but it is not the same pattern that we see in other actors. And of course, we are constantly facing this criticism that we choose which political actors to check, that we are biased to some political parties or actors, but the truth is that some some use disinformation more frequently than others.
Well, what about the issue of the university and the government? So you are both here at this university, but what if your work in terms of debunking false statements really upset some of the politicians who would be funding some parts of this university? How does that interplay? Is there a concern that if you fact check too much, you would annoy the people who are funding the university or the very thing that you're trying to do?
The university is funded by the state. So as fact checkers, our main job is to fact check politicians and institutions. So I'm sorry, but I've never considered this as a problem.
What if the university, what I was kind of getting at is, what if the university, if somebody at the university starts saying something that's not true? Do you, because that's a sensitive political thing, right? Because they're your colleague, but they're saying something that's not true. How do you fact check somebody at the university as opposed to somebody just only outside of the university?
It never happened, actually. One of the reasons is university people, scientists are not very popular in the society. So one of the reasons we fact check something is that the person who said that is popular, or the content is very popular on social media. So it is a rare occasion where a scientific person will be so popular. But we have fact checked some claims about Sofia University, and it's quite okay. I do not perceive it as a problem to say this is not true. Sofia University is not fell out of every education rankings, as the claim said.
Well, what about student to student? And Svet, maybe if you could address this in terms of your students. when you're teaching students about this very topic, are there nuances, are there things that your students are debating about what's true or what's almost true or what's a little bit true?
Usually students are young people, and young people are not so mature socially. Some of them tend to be gullible. But nevertheless, they at the beginning of their development as critical thinkers, and actually there are a lot of good students at the Sofia University, but usually they use this spreading of peer-to-peer messages and communication. So the first thing that I try to teach them is to choose sources of information that are reliable, that provide accurate information, and to be skeptical about when they see something on the internet which is fishy or suspicious as the element of truth. And if you return to your previous questions about the academic community and whether there are lecturers who spread false news, actually in Bulgaria, academic community is relatively independent from the politics, and also there are some standards in science that to be reliable, to use arguments, to use facts, and still it helps in order most people in the academia to avoid spreading disinformation. So most cases are related to politicians, especially to some extreme parties, either left or right wing.
Well, you keep getting to the issue of trust. That's really interesting because I guess I'm really interested in how do you teach someone how to do that? Because it seems that that's pretty difficult, right? Because it takes time to develop an understanding of things. But on one hand, at a university community, we tend to trust one another because it's a university community. But on the other hand, students may not have those skills when they come here.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible, but gradually, this is the benefit of university education, that you are exposed to a lot of information, to a lot of knowledge. You live in an intellectual environment, and gradually you develop skills to be skeptical, to assume what is true, what is not true. To establish whether people that provide some kind of information, whether they want to influence you, to mold your beliefs and attitudes or not, or this is just genuine sharing of information without intent to influence, to mold your opinion. And gradually, most of students develop these type of skills and understanding, and they are able in the end to assess whether conversation or information process is genuine, it's sincere, or not quite genuine and not quite sincere. It's possible.
Interesting. And Ralitsa, in terms of the European Union generally, are there some initiatives that the European Union has been doing to fight disinformation?
Actually, the European Union was maybe the first organization, let's say that, with major initiatives in this direction. Even in 2018, the European Commission formed a task force in order to develop a definition to explain online disinformation and to provide measures to achieve that. And since then, a lot of work has been done, including this code of practice signed by major players on the field, including social media platforms, major media fact checkers, and NGOs and other organizations. So, of course, there are steps. Now we have also regulations on the European level accepted, which also, it cannot be said that fight disinformation, but has something to do with this with this topic, address this issue in different ways. So yes, many things have been done. Currently, Bulgarian government also tries to suggest a law in order to fight disinformation. And the good news is that this law is written in the same vein as the European regulations to fight coordinated sharing, to fight inauthentic behavior, and not to deal with content. The law does not provide any definition of disinformation, because we had such efforts before to present a limited definition in order to use this as a government, as a ruling parties, in a way which will be comfortable for them. So now we do not have this case. So yes, some things are being done. I, as a journalist, I have to admit that I am skeptical, because I do not believe in too much regulation where it comes to the journalism and freedom of speech. In my opinion, people should learn how to deal with it and how to live with it. As with the viruses, it is the same thing.
And also other disinformation related to national pride, the untrue information that support the idea that the nation is great. For instance, untrue information that the University of Bologna, considered as the oldest Western institution, perhaps one of the oldest university in the world, was established by a Bulgarian in the 11th century, which turns out that it's not true. There was a lecturer in law in the 12th century at the University of Bologna. His name was Bulgaro, but he was born in Bologna, and there is no information that he was of Bulgarian origin.
Well, I did not know that story. We're going to have to end it there. Thank you both for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like additional information about the Sofia University, please go to uni-sofia.bg. Or if you'd like information about Fact Check Bulgaria, please go to factcheck.bg. If you would like to send a note to me at the show, please go ahead and do so by sending an email to highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. And thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. I'm Stephen Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.